Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there folks, Colin here from the Home Building Hub, sitting here as always with co-host Darren Brennan. And today we are going to do a three-part series, a short and sharp series for you based on some feedback from some of our listeners. And we're going to provide some common, terms that we use in our industry. And we're going to target, this one will be all about land terms that relate to land and land contracts. And then we're going to talk about house terms. And then the third one, we're going to talk about actually your contract drawings and the terms and to help you really review those. Okay, so they'll be shorter and sharper than our usual episodes. So to this, as I said, this one will be about the land. So before we kick off, over to you, Darren. How are you going?
G'day, Cole. Going well, mate. We're just saying it's brightened up a bit outside. It's nice and chilly here in Ballarat this morning, mate. So it certainly kept me on my toes this morning, mate. I won't be falling asleep, mate. That's for sure, because it's freezing outside here,
Right.
Which is nice. It's nice, mate. Cracking
day.
Day.
Beautiful.
Let's get into it, eh?
All right. So the fee for the podcast, guys, if you like it, please just share it with another individual. That's all we ask. And Darren, do you want to kick off with the disclaimer before we begin?
Mate, absolutely. So we were just debating, do we need a disclaimer every time? And unfortunately, we actually probably do. So we'll just run through it. So whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any legal or financial decisions. So
nice.
Flown
well
through.
Done. Anyone who wants to know a bit more about myself or about Darren, the episode number 1 is an introductory episode about who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing the podcast, etc. So you can jump back to that one if you want to learn a little bit more. So let's begin, Daz. We're going to start today with land-related terms. I'll kick off with the first one. So the first term is a land deposit. Now, most people probably know what that means, but for those who don't, essentially a land deposit is the initial amount of money you pay to the landowner or the developer most of the time. Usually it's a 10% deposit. Sometimes these days it might be a 5% or it might be a bit different. But usually let's just go on a 10% deposit required, and you at that same time you'll be signing the land contract. Okay, so they're the first couple of steps you'll take that when you're, securing land. One of the most important things we can tell you is make sure you get your conveyancer or a conveyancer to review the land contract. Okay, so that's the first one. What's the second one there, Daz?
The second one, land settlement, which reflects the agreed timing in which you will pay the landowner for the balance of funds. So what that's meaning is you've already paid the 5% or 10% deposit or whatever amount of deposit you paid there. So that balance of funds less that deposit already paid and officially makes you the owner of that block of land. So that's normally taken place with your conveyancer, lawyer, bank, anyone else involved in that to settle that land into your name. So, well done. You now own the joint, or at least have a mortgage over it.
Nice. The next term is titled land. So you'll see that flicked around everywhere on packages that you might see online and everything. But essentially, titled land is when your block is officially or becomes registered through the relevant council, and essentially it's ready for you to proceed or ready for a builder to build on. Okay, so when your land is titled, potentially if you bought the land as it was titled already, there will be an agreed, as Darren said in the previous term, settlement period. So let's say it's 30 days, for example. That's when you'll have to pay on that land. But titled land means it's ready to build on, and the benefit of that, you can obviously get your home started quicker. But the only, the other side of that might be you need to have your finances in order when you're buying titled land.
Cool. Over to me, mate, which is untitled land. So this is when the land's not titled, really specifically. But what that really means is that you can't build on the land yet. It can't be settled, depending on how early in the process you bought that land. It may still just be a paddock. So therefore, it's got roads and infrastructure to be installed. So, yeah, basically, you can work with a builder generally. And again, each builder will be slightly different in terms of how long before that land title is due that they'll happily take a deposit off you. But you can certainly talk to them about, will a house fit on that? What's that going to look like? Obviously, it allows you time to lock the land in at today's price, and often in this more recent market, people have done really well in doing so because they've been able to gain some equity whilst that land is being built, which is amazing. But it also gives you a little bit more time to save some money along the way as well. So if you want to get in early, pay that initial deposit and then be able to save along the way. The risks certainly can be that the land can be delayed, and we've certainly seen that out there a fair bit, and sometimes a developer may tell you that the land's going to be 12 months away and it could take 18 months or 2 years, and so that can impact your own position. What else can I tell you on that one? If the land is delayed and the builder may well need to charge additional to build that home when that land becomes available. So a contingency amount, I guess. And probably the other one to be mindful of is most or in fact all building contracts have a time frame in there that the builder may actually say, I can no longer build this home at that price. So be mindful if you are signing up too early with a builder that may come around and you have to go on today's prices. But generally when that is happening, the upshot is the market's moving pretty quick and you're probably likely to have gained a fair bit of equity in your land. So over to you, mate.
Plan of subdivision, otherwise referred to, I guess, as an acronym of POS. So essentially, when we look at, we being the builder or the sales consultant or whoever it may be, when we look at your block of land, we want to see, if the house fits, we want to look at the site cost, we want to look at the conditions and the requirements of that block. One of the documents we use, and we're going to cover the others in a second, is a plan of subdivision. Essentially what that is it's a drawing of the blocks in that stage that are approved by the council and the relevant authorities to show you, the width of the block and the depth of the block, to show you whether it's got easements at the back, the orientation of the block, what way it's facing. It gives you the overall dimensions and size of that block as well. Okay, so that's what a plan of subdivision is. It just gives us a visual bird's eye view reference of the dimensions, the size, etc. And also, lastly, I'll note at the bottom of your plan of subdivision, on the last page or 2 or 3 pages, there's actually creative restrictions. Okay, so there might be only 1 or 2 or 3, but they are the restrictions that we and you must abide by. Okay, so plan of sub is a very important part of the process. It will be in your land contract as well.
Great. So I'm on to engineering plans, and this is not one that's always provided. So you can ask for it and it should be available, but not always provided. Basically, it's a bit like a plan for a home. So it's going to give more information about how that land's going to be developed. So information about the road, the infrastructure that's going in, etc. It'll give us some information about the proposed conditions, easements, crossover locations, potentially illustrate street trees. They can vary from engineer to engineer as to what level of detail they put on their engineering plans, but essentially the builder uses the document to work out things like your site cost, because it'll provide things like various levels across the block that'll help them in that area. It generally only notes them at the corners of the lot, and it may well note if there is what's called a batter, so a rise or fall sort of towards the front or the rear of the block. It may note those as well. But it's a pretty essential item to get your hands onto so you can understand a bit more what you're building. The plan of subdivision is a 2-dimensional document. This is referring to more of a 3-dimensional document, so how the land is going to come up out of the ground or go down into the ground, etc. So, cool. Over to you, Cole.
Easements, also a pretty common occurrence in both a plan of subdivision and a engineering plan. Okay, so an easement refers to, I guess, a certain portion of the land. It's usually the rear of the block where the relevant services or utilities are running underground. The way I explain it to people in most simple term is basically it's the big, thick pipe that runs under the ground usually at the back of the block, in which you can't go and build a house on top of. There are certain exceptions here and there, but in theory, you cannot build a house on top of an easement. And when you do build a house near an easement, it does require additional foundation underneath the home, because if the relevant authority comes in, because there's an issue with the pipe that runs at the back, they need to repair it. And in order to repair it, they need to get to it. Therefore, they need to dig up the entire backyard or 3-metre section of your backyard. The house needs to stand on its own. Okay, so when you're in close proximity to an easement, that's something to factor in. Your site costs will probably be a little bit higher, and realistically, it's usually going to be covered with garden bed or grass. So that's totally fine. But an easement's found on the plan of subdivision. Basically, it'll tell you the depth of the easement, but I guess, or the width, perhaps I should say, Darren. They're usually 2 metres, 2.5 metres, or 3 metres. They're usually at the back of the block, but be careful and get your sales consultant to have a look at the plan of sub and engineering, because the engineering will also give you specific detail on what type of easement it is, as does the plan of sub. But it's good to get your consultant to have a look at that to make sure that the house fits, in case there are other easements on the side of the block or on the actual left or right-hand side of your block that could be backing onto the rear of another block that has an easement. Okay, so that's what an easement is, something to talk to your sales consultant about a little bit deeper.
Cool. Now, my turn next. So estate covenants, requirements and guidelines. These are essentially a set of rules that are stipulated generally by the land developer, outlining the items that you must include in your home. So this can include things such as how the facade looks to the street, so specific facade types. It can include things such as the roof, the driveway, what that's made out of, garden plantings, etc. So all those things can be included in that. They're generally noted in the land contract and sometimes can be called other things, such as an MCP. I guess these days most developers provide them to really ensure that the estate's going to look good. We want your home to look good, but we also want to control what your neighbours are able to build as well, so that they don't end up building a pink shed next door and devalue your property. So they're a good thing. They set a standard for the estate, and often those estates that have stronger design guidelines generally tend to present a better end outcome for the estate, so that the quality of the homes that are in that estate are lifted and you end up with just a nicer looking place to live. So pretty cool.
Yep, nice. And you mentioned the next one, which is MCP. So that's an acronym for a term called the Memorandum of Common Provisions. So as you're starting to learn these terms, when we're putting together what the requirements are for your block, you've got a plan of subdivision, you've got an engineering plan, and you've also got design guidelines or estate covenants. Sometimes a developer will also provide you and provide us with an MCP, which is essentially a more detailed document outlining, again, the requirements of the estate in text format, but also it gives us some other information around a term which we'll cover next, building envelopes. So essentially, where you can and where you cannot build on that block, talking about the, I guess, other things around maybe the height restrictions of that block as well. So there's a range of things. An MCP is, I guess, another level of detail that helps us work out what we can and what we cannot build on your block, making sure we comply with the rules of the estate and the approved plans for your stage.
Cool. So building envelopes. I guess that's really the permitted area that the dwelling can be built on or within the overall block. So you've got to build within your block, and there'll be a certain set of areas where requirements that you need to comply by to have that home compliant and be able to get a building permit. So that's specifying that area.
Yeah, so close to building envelopes, another term that's used is a setback. Okay, so a building envelope, as Darren explained, it's essentially a picture of your block with restrictions around the boundaries of what those setbacks need to be. Okay, so setbacks are the distance from the front of a boundary or the side boundary or the rear boundary to where your house needs to be positioned. So probably the easiest way to explain that is a front setback refers to the front line of your boundary to the front of your home. A garage setback may be further than that. So usually a front setback might be 4 metres, okay, and garage setback might be 5 metres, for example, and that's the front boundary to your garage, and the distance between that must be 5. Okay, so in addition to that, there are side setbacks and there are rear setbacks that essentially would be applied. So they're pretty close to each other, building envelope and setbacks, but a building envelope, I guess, provides you with the required setbacks across the whole block. If there is no building envelope provided, depending on the size of your block, we apply, I guess, the standard Rescode rules and regulations that dictate what the setbacks can be. Okay, so it's again something to talk to your sales consultant about, and they will know what those setbacks are. But usually 4 to the front and probably 3 to the back is the most common, I guess, setbacks for normal home designs on blocks over 300 square metres.
Cool. Next one's a level 1 compaction report. And what that's referring to is basically if there is fill on your block, then there's every chance, and it's not a requirement, but there is every chance that your developer has decided to compact that soil that they're bringing in onto the lot to what's called level 1 compaction, which is a certain level of density or how hard it's been whacked down. And there's certain requirements in order to make sure that that is meets that level 1 compaction. And basically it's considered to be compacted and good for building upon, and most like natural soil that's been sitting there for a long time. It's less likely to subside under the home as it settles. So it's really trying to, overcome the settlement of that land in terms of the soil settling in on to its natural. What I guess would be the best way to explain that. An engineer must be present when the fill is being placed on the land, and it's tested every 200 mil to ensure that it is compacted to the required level of pressure. And really what that's doing is hopefully saving you a little bit of money on your slab, because they can have a slightly less thick slab or not require any piering potentially, depending on that level 1 compaction. So, yeah, there you go.
Yep. My next one is bushfire zone. It's commonly referred to as BAL zone, so bushfire attack level. The most common, I guess, zone referred to is 12.5. Now, there are additional ones, e.g., we just call that BAL. So BAL 12.5 is common, BAL 29, BAL 40, etc. So they are additional ones. Most common Rescode greenfield estates will be sitting in at 12.5. And what that bushfire attack level means is that essentially every block that we look at, there's a government site called Vic Plan that we jump on, and it's got all the different layers and things that we can look at and apply. One of those is bushfire. And essentially, if your block sits in a bushfire zone, there will be some additional items that we need to put inside and I guess on your home to comply with the bushfire requirements. Okay, so essentially there's a set of requirements the home must meet if you are in that bushfire. An example of some of them might be metal fly screens, additional wrap around the roof area, etc. And it's really to help stop embers attach in a fire situation. And I guess for the most part, at the start of your journey, you might be, if you're on the outskirt of an estate, you might be in a bushfire zone. By the time you get the house started, a few months later, or the next stage is released, you might actually be out of that bushfire zone. Okay, so usually the price for a bushfire, for each builder does vary, but it might be somewhere between, 3, 4 or 5 grand, something like that for those additional items. Okay, so they're not they're not required if you're not in a bushfire zone. They are required if you are in a bushfire zone, and they're of benefit to your home. Yep.
Cool. Next one's Rescode, which is a minimum set of standards regarding the siding of the home, the building height, windows, and then being able to overlook neighbours, sunlight, access to the home, and shading from a dwelling on the neighbour's home or yard. So these are really the real basic. Your house has to comply with this to be able to get a building permit. So, Rescode just, puts a really standard set of requirements together for people to build their home on a block. And, great starting point, so that, again, controls the street front, controls what people are able to do with, without impacting their neighbours too much. So next.
To flow on from Rescode, so there are a different set of rules and regulations for blocks that are under 300 square metres, and we are referring to Victoria here for the most part. So small lot housing code is what that's called. So if there's a block that you're going to purchase under 300 square metres, it will most likely, 99% of the time, sit these days in a small lot housing code type A or type B. And essentially the small lot housing code is a different set of rules to Rescode that Darren just mentioned. Okay, so there's different setback allowances, different requirements, and based on the reality that that house is going to be a smaller house, and therefore there's some real specific requirements around the private open space, as in the open area of that block, but also some unshaded area during the day for the sunlight to be in. You can't just fill out the entire block with the house and have no shade and no space. So there are certain requirements. So under 300 square metres, there's a different set of rules that we need to comply with, as opposed to Rescode, which is over 300 square metres. And again, that information is written on your plan of subdivision. If you shoot through to the last couple of pages, it will tell you whether it's a type A or a type B.
Cool. Getting near the end of these, Colin. Boundary or survey pegs. So basically, these are put into the ground to specify the edges or the perimeter of your property. And so you'll have the plan of subdivision showing that your block is a 16 metre by 32 metre, for example, block, and then the pegs on the land itself will illustrate where your block sits. And I guess, you want to make sure that they're in place so that you know that you're building on your block of land. So that's pretty much it. And over to you for the last one, Cole.
Yes, so similar to the previous one, there's a re-establishment survey. Okay, so in the event that your boundary or survey pegs are not there or they've been moved, then the builder will issue a re-establishment survey, to basically go and reconfirm and replace those pegs in the right position. They obviously want to build the house on the block in the right spot. That will come at an additional cost with most builders, because they're going to have to go and pay someone to go out there and redo or re-establish those pegs, and that's the point of that. What I would say is a little tip for people who are signing a land contract: sign that land contract with a note saying that subject to all survey pegs being present. Pop that in there as a little tip for you. So that means when you go to settle on the land and take it over officially, you want to make sure that those 4 pegs are there. Okay, and that will be the developer's responsibility, not yours, if there's only 2 of them left or something. So be sure to do that. Okay, so that about wraps up the land terms, Daz. We flew through those pretty quick. So everyone, thank you for listening for, I guess, the land component. Upcoming to after this will be our house terms, and then we're going to talk about contract drawing terms. So anything else to add, Daz? Dad. I said Dad. Daz, before we wrap this up.
No, mate, awesome. Let's jump into the next one, eh? We'll fly through them as well. So thanks for listening.
Good on you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye.